There you go. Donald, it's actually a pleasure to speak to you in person. Yeah.
Thank you, Madhu. You too.
I have consumed a lot of your content.
I,
Uh,
I I was very surprised.
no. You don't need to be surprised. It's actually very popular. And the interesting thing is, I mean, the amount of detail, and because when it comes to critiquing and evaluating, you need to have that level of magnifying lens to get through and evaluate and dissect everything. You have that patience, and you present it very well.
Well, I certainly have had plenty of a good few years at this stage of improving it. You know, the first few years certainly were I wouldn't say a waste, but there wasn't much point to it. You know, it
Okay.
was it took some time to learn it. You know.
Okay. Yeah. By the way, I mean, let me set the stage for this interview, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay. I know. Thanks for agreeing to speak to us about being a crew for Trent Grimsey's English Channel swim record, 6 hours and 55 minutes. And so my name is Madhu Nagaraja. I'm one of the executive committee members on the IMSHOF committee. I'm originally from India. I currently live in Canada.
Yep.
So I know the entire world knows that Donal is the one who manages LoneSwimmer. But tell the world, like, what they don't know. Like, what else do you do? Like, what's your something that you do outside LoneSwimmer and your family? And I know you've done some fun swims. Yeah.
Um. Yeah. Look, there's not much. I'm a fairly private person. I keep very much to myself, which comes certainly as a surprise to a lot of people who might know of an aspect of me online. I'm an engineer. Is myself and my wife here, 3 dogs. It's southeast of Ireland on Waterford's Copper Coast, which anybody who has looked at LoneSwimmer will know. I think is I rank it as joint number one best places to swim in the world of those that I have swum, since none of us could swim everywhere. You've probably swam more places than me. It is a glorious coast for swimming on. Absolutely gloriously clean water, quiet, empty. Empty by and large, which is hence lone swimmer. Swim by myself all the time. With great cliffs, great scenery, just nigh on perfect, and just the right amount of cold water. Just a little bit colder than the English Channel, which is just perfect.
What is just the amount? Like, what is the average temperature over there?
Oh, it'd be very hard to say what the average temperature. So today is summer solstice. It's just under 13 degrees there about 2 hours ago. Which is, as you and I will know, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. It was an unusual. I went down after work. I went down for a swim, and you couldn't see into town. It's a cliff where we go in. It's a cove it's been run as a kind of recreational swimming club since the 1930s. So very much part of the local culture. And it's about 2 kilometers from the town and the beach. You couldn't see the beach in the rain, and it was about 2 meters swell. So the weather was just on the right edge of unpleasant, that I was the only one there, despite all as I've been mentioning recently, one or two, but even my most recent post was, all the COVID swimmers. There was no sign of any of them tonight. So it was like, it's like the old days. This is just me here, getting changed in the rain, going out in a bit of choppy water, coming home by myself. It's great.
Very nice.
Yeah.
One last question on the personal front. What kind of an engineer are you, Donal?
Medical devices manufacturing and project engineering. So yeah, background in kind of contract manufacturing and some of the big company names that I think in my career at various points that you'd know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's all precision equipment.
Yeah, it's not so much the equipment as in producing the working devices.
Okay.
Whether it's medical devices. Yeah, currently working in vessel closure, what they call vessel closure, so closing up post operative incisions from the inside.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because I mean, like when you mention engineer, because I can see the amount of analysis that goes in your content, which is amazing. Yeah, very good. Yeah,
yeah.
let's,
I don't think I've ever mentioned it on there because I always feel like it wouldn't be fair to people to say that I bring an engineer's mindset to how I look at things, because all the engineers I know are just as different as everybody else. We all have different ways of looking at things.
No. I actually picked it up because I mean the amount of analysis that goes, either somebody should have a math background or a physics background. So that's how I actually that's what I assumed when I was reading your content. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like the detail.
Awesome, very good. In fact, I've spent a lot of time. Actually, I went through the 4 parts of your experience with Trent.
Yeah.
So, like, tell us, okay, how did you like fall into this whole fun adventure? Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny. I remember I was heading out on we were heading out on the boat with the swim, and I got a text from one of my friends at home in Ireland, channel swimmer, and there's a good few of us. You and I will know that you might not know a channel swimmer for most of your life, and then you go from not knowing any to knowing a lot. And they were like, "What the hell are you doing out there on the boat?" And I had to tell them that I had read Trent's intent to try for the channel record, and I was absolutely intrigued. That was I think it was early in that year. I think it was about 6 months before the swim, and for some reason I emailed him out of the blue. I went, "Look, I just happen to know that I'm going to be over there crewing for a swim. I'm going to be in Dover crewing for a swim when you're there." I can't remember the details, but I just think this is just really interesting, and I'd love to be able to chance to say hello if I get the opportunity. I can't remember if Trent even remembered this email.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just a guy. He wouldn't have known me from Adam, and why should he? And then as it happened, we were staying in Varn Ridge Channel Swimming Camp, caravan camp. I had myself and Owen O'Keefe, my friend, had been crewing for a channel swim 2 days previously, and I think Trent was there with Damien and with Harley, his coach. Obviously in the mindset, I hadn't actually. I think I'd briefly met Trent like the day before just to say hello again. I think it's amazing to even think of going out into the channel to go for a record. That was the aspect that had just struck me, because my own experience had been so bloody awful, and I had seen, I crewed, I can't remember, like I had crewed on maybe 8 or 10 channel swims going across Ireland at that stage, and then I was, when we were out crewing on it, I was doing a little bit of tweeting back, back when Twitter had, wasn't the hell site that it is now, when we could all still use it. And I think either Trent or Harley had obviously followed it. And when we came back in from the swim, they said, "You obviously know a little bit about the channel, about maybe the history." I think it might have been because I'd mentioned 2CV, the boy. We were going past 2CV, and I was saying where we were in relation to it, and it was that kind of thing that I was just doing it for my few friends on Twitter, and I guess it was just clear that I had some kind of awareness, and I was going to be there for a few days. So they said, "Would you mind, hopping on the boat as an additional crew member?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, on one condition, that I could bring my friend Owen." And Owen has also swum the channel. He's to this and likely to hold on to the record, but he at the time was the youngest Irish English solo swimmer. At the age of 16, there's a reason. It's a fairly significant age gap between us. So I knew Owen would love the opportunity. You know, he wasn't 16 at the time. He was a good bit older at that stage. But so yeah, we went out. So we were supplementary to Damien and to Harley, his coach as well. But you know, so that was how it came about. It was just an opportunity. It was just luck.
Awesome. In fact, another interesting thing on your website is how do you select a crew?
Yeah,
that's one of your topics. Okay. Now,
yeah.
I mean, we'll get into that in another interview. But like, what were you thinking when Trent asked you? Because like you've set some best practices in terms of, hey, this is how you select a crew. I think you wrote that in 2013, if I'm right. So what were you thinking, okay, when Trent asked you to be his crew? Yeah.
I think from his point of view, I was going to be able to provide maybe some context for people who were following him who wouldn't know the channel. I mean, you know, those of us, Madhu, who have been out there, it does. I think it profoundly or to some degree changes all of us in some way, and maybe more than any other swim, at least the big swims. Yeah. So you could, for maybe people who might have been following, I could kind of add a little bit of that kind of color of going, saying, oh, you know, he's doing this speed for the first wire. So that was my main thought. And I knew that both myself and Owen, having just crewed on what I recall as being particularly challenging, choppy conditions 2 days previously. And I knew from both of our previous experience that we were going to be fine on the boat. I think it was the first time out. I think it was my first time out crewing with Mike Oram on his boat. So that was the main thing. I was like, okay, look, I'm not completely new to it. I don't want to do anything that might affect whatever is going on. And hey, you're not going to believe it. I just got paid. I not got paid, but I got asked to take the front seat on my favorite sport to watch what turned out to be a historical swim.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I mean, I was just privileged and lucky to be there. You know, both Owen and I felt that, and you know, still do to this day. You know,
it is awesome. Yeah. In fact, I don't know if because I was following Trent in 2010, 11, 12. I believe in early 2012 or late 2011, he had pneumo. And he couldn't. That's one of the reasons I think he didn't make it to the Olympics 2012, right? I remember reading about it.
Yeah.
So, like, what was his mind frame like coming into the channel? Was he like driven because of all the setbacks that he went through in the last year or so? Like, what was his like mental outlook?
So, of the things that I saw, and I still recall, and I think I wrote it, but the thing that most impressed me, and the thing that I felt set Trent apart from all the channel swimmers that I knew, was his mindset. I don't know a successful channel swimmer that, you know, however different we all are, we all do tend to share, because it's necessary, we tend to share a drive. And for the swimmers who've been successful in making it across, it's that kind of refusal to give up, you know. Right. So that's kind of common in the people that you meet who are swimming, who are channel swimmers. And Trent took that to a level that I hadn't personally seen before in how he was able to concentrate, and I talk about it during the swim as well, but how he was able to single-mindedly tell himself that he could do something and listen to himself and believe himself. You understand? It's almost like he was playing he was playing a version of himself, and the version of himself was telling him, you can do this, you will do this. And then himself was listening to it and believing it. But he was making that all up, you know, and it was like, I've never seen anything like that before. So it was extraordinary. And it struck me then, before the swim, not knowing what was going to happen, it struck me then what a respectful kind of self-aware all-round pleasant and yet utterly focused person he was. And I thought, okay, that's even more the difference between so many of us and the person who was the world number one, in 2012. I thought, ooh, difference between us players, us posers, swimmers, and an actual professional, and just that amazing focus that goes beyond normal channel swimmers, if there is such a thing.
So, like, I mean, a big chunk of this formula is Trent himself.
Yeah.
Other than Trent, like, what else does it require to go for the channel record? Yeah. Like, from a crew, as a like the formula is much larger than Trent himself, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is the navigator, there's the boat equipment, there's the crew, and the role that the crew play. And I also want to talk about his mom making that call. Okay, so let's go there eventually. But explain, okay, all the different components of the formula that is required to make this happen. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I mentioned it again. I think I'll probably say this too much, but I think I mentioned it in the blog, Madhu, that the first hour out on the boat, right? I mean, what we went out on, right, was good conditions, but not perfect conditions.
Okay.
And I haven't actually reviewed what I'd written. I thought, that would be boring. I'll go on what I remember, because I have so many kind of good memories of it and fairly detailed memories of it. That first hour out was blazing. So that's one aspect of it. You're taking somebody who's used to swimming at 5 kilometers an hour, and that's okay. On my best days when I was younger and I was chasing some of my faster friends, I might have been able to manage, in the right circumstances, 4 kilometers an hour for the first hour, right? I would be typically at my best 3 to 3.2. So the difference between 3 to 3.2 kilometers an hour and somebody swimming 5 kilometers an hour regularly is a world. We know as swimmers that we can really only swim with people who are the exact same. If somebody's 30 seconds or 15 seconds faster for 100 or 200 meters, you can't swim a long time with them, because one person's going to get tired or the other person's going to get cold. Whereas, so just that pure a lifetime of professional level training, which of course then is achieved with a lifetime of professional level coaching. And Harley, who is his coach, was, they had been training in Dover Pool. They had been doing all the type of high mileage training that Athena, professional marathon swimmer, is going to do. Some of the rest of us will hit that kind of mileage maybe in training for a channel swim. We might do it a few times depending on how long we're going to stay doing the big swims. Whereas these guys are doing it, year round, and they're doing it for a good few years. So Harley was a very professional kind of swimming coach. He wasn't thinking or looking or saying much about the overall picture. He was concentrated on Trent. Damien, who at the time was not world number 2, and they were friendly. It wasn't an antagonistic relationship. Damien was completely supportive as well, and they were the 2 main crew for Trent. So the feeding aspects that we're so familiar with, about all individualizing our own feeding regimens and how we do it, was entirely different to how a pro does it, who's going to take a feed every 10 to 15 minutes and take a smaller amount and not break stroke.
Okay. I saw that. Yeah, I saw that in your video.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing, not about Trent swim. The biggest thing about Trent swim is that Trent set a record. He broke 7 hours, something that many people thought was impossible. but the fact, the opportunity for me, not only to see it, was to I think it was probably the first time that a channel record swim, there was at least some coverage of it.
Okay.
From somebody who was maybe in some way able to cover it a little bit. Having my own experience as a channel swimmer and as channel crew, had just a little bit of writing experience from writing the blog. And being able to, and then to be able to go around and say, guys, you're not going to believe it. I was there. I got to see it. Here's what happened. You know? So again, how cool is that?
Yeah, it is awesome. Yeah. And what was Mike Oram's role? Like, I mean, how did Mike Oram influence? I know Navigator plays a critical role here, but in terms of manipulating the situations and like being one of the critical entities in the crew.
So I guess we could divide my answer to that into a couple of different bits. In terms of the actual swim and the navigation, Mike has years of experience. He's one of the most experienced of the pilots. He's one of the original CS and PF Channel Swimming and Piloting Federation founders, along with Frida Streeter and Kevin Murphy. It was the three of those, as I recall, were the ones who founded CS and PF. Mike, and I've spoken to Kevin about it separately and spoken to a few other people. You know, Mike would be known to a very, very small number of people who might be interested in that aspect of it, as someone who kind of figured out more about the filling of the Wisant Bay part of the channel, the backfilling of that around the tidal aspects of it. I asked Kevin about that because Mike had said to me, he's, I'm the one that figured it out. And you know, I spoke to Kevin and spoke to someone else as well, and they said, yeah, that's by and large true. Mike is the one who has figured that out, and that has helped. And that type of understanding the local waterway, whatever your local waterway is very important. You know, Mike's experience in having already taken across Peter Stoichev, having taken across some very high profile swimmers on record attempts, obviously gave him one of the two best pilots that Trent could have spoken. Just on my experience, I haven't been out with all the pilots that were active at the time. I think I'd probably crewed on maybe 7 of what was then the 12 pilots. I think Reg Brickle in CSA would be the same as well, in terms of capability, you know. And that's not to say the others aren't. Just I think in the opportunity, Mike very much had something that maybe benefited more than some of the others, and that along with all the experience, he had charts. So he had Peter Stoichev's charts, and he could overlay. Which was something that other pilots wouldn't have been able to do. Trent had obviously picked the right tide. The weather had by and large cooperated, and Mike was also using. I'm struggling to remember who the observer was. I honestly can't remember right now, but. Mike also had a pilot who was working with himself and his son Lance, who's also a channel pilot, called James, and I can't remember his second name, but he was the actual steersman on the boat for most of the time. He was actually the helmsman, and Mike only took over for a very small period on the helm, which wouldn't have been something that I think we would think much about. But I think having those two there was good. So having a really experienced helmsman who's a pilot and then a pilot as well allowed a greater level of concentration for the entire time.
Were they always trying to manipulate the coordinates to get the shortest distance?
Yeah, we the whole way through, and we weren't doing it. I can't remember when we started. I think probably started at the end of the first hour. But Mike was able to give updates to Harley and Damien and say Trent is so many minutes ahead of Peter, right? So very much like the kind of thing that we see when we watch swimming in the Olympics and they overlay a line. Here's the world record line. So Trent had that. Now that wasn't going to get him across. He had to be on and he was ahead from the start. He was ahead on that imaginary Peter Stoichev line for the whole thing. But the gap got narrower and narrower as we got closer and closer to the end. So that was very important. Yeah. So I would have said all four of those, Harley, Damien, Mike, and James. They were all that was the core team. We were the not the observers, but the onlookers.
So, I mean, and just to probe you further, is there one thing that you can actually isolate from? You actually, you mentioned that you flew for several crossings. There's one thing that you can pick out of this particular swim that actually, I mean, other than the world record, okay, in terms of the equation working cohesively, what is that one thing that you would?
It's almost unfortunate to have to say it for the rest of us, for most of the swimming world, but it was, almost perfect technique for the entire thing. I can remember, I can't remember what point it was, but I'm going to say somewhere between 4 and 5 hours. You could check, and I remember thinking, his Trent's technique is not quite as perfect as it was. And a couple of minutes after I thought that, Harley leaned in with a whiteboard with a message that said tech.
Okay.
And at the next feed, he, like the 2 seconds that he had to communicate, that's what he was communicating to Trent. Get back in control of your technique. I mean, the rest of us would die to have technique that good at his worst. We to have it that good. But he came back into it, and that was that utter concentration as well. Concentration by Harley as a coach, focusing on what he needed, what he could affect, which was Trent. He could only affect Trent. He couldn't affect anything else. He couldn't affect the line we were taking, the weather, whatever way the water was going to roll around. He could do that. He could affect Trent, and the only thing Trent could affect was his stroke.
Okay, very nice. Yeah,
so just absolutely beautiful to watch. Just as a modern, as someone who just would describe himself as an average swimmer, Trent was beautiful to watch.
Beautiful. Okay, good. Yeah. You also mentioned in your on your blog, and something that I have learned from my channel experiences. Okay, things that you can control and things that you can't control. Right? Yeah, very important in life. Some of us have to do these extreme stuff to learn that.
Yes. Yeah. Not sure I've fully learned it yet, but certainly in swimming, yes. Certain things you bring that back out of it. Yeah. That message about swimming or whatever that I would say maybe one of the things that I brought back, not that I had a tendency for it, but always like, I think we all know that the most dangerous thing that you can bring into the water is panic, or at least that's how I would say it, and that panic is not necessarily about I'm going to drown in the next 5 seconds because I'm too far from the shore, that a beginner or a novice might have, but it's, I'm not going to panic about the fact that I've aimed for this and I'm not sure if I can do it. I'm going to keep trying. Or Kevin Murphy telling me, I've swam the channel 34 times and I've been terrified 34 times. It's like, but I'm still going to jump off into the water.
Well, I know you mentioned about hour 4 and 5. So I think at one point Trent says he's cramping up.
Yeah.
I was surprised to read that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Again, that's. I'm not sure that is entirely surprising. In that, you know, when with the effort that he's putting in, for the time that he's holding it, the pressure that he has put on himself, which was invisible to myself and Owen. Not just I want to try a world record for the world record in a sport that nobody follows or cares about in general, right? I want to try for that, but he had an additional pressure that we weren't aware of, which was anything that we might have seen there. But Trent was seeing this very much as part of trying to continue, and this is not me speaking for him. This is what I've observed, is that, you know, being a professional swimmer, apart from not being glamorous, it's not being well paid. So he was trying to use this, you know, you could become a world record to try and you know, gain something out of the sport that you obviously excel at, that you are world number one at, and you've set a world record, and yet is not, doesn't pay well, you know. So that there was that aspect of it, that would have been a bit invisible to the rest of us. So that was an additional pressure, you know. So yeah.
And then I want to talk about two things, but I want to focus on, okay, like when that call from his mom, like how did it change? Like how did it affect him? Like what did the crew feel like?
Well, you know, that a message like that is again, it's very powerful, because I think when you're in the water, no matter how close somebody is, no matter what you're doing, no matter how plugged in you are to what you're doing and to those people that are near to you, that short distance between you and the boat is quite wide, even at its closest. It's something that strikes me in the pool. You know, when I'm in the pool and I'm in the lane, at one side of the pool, and in the pool that I swim in, there's a sauna at the side of the pool. And when people come out from the sauna to go into the steam room or whatever, and they're having that little break, and they're sitting there, and I look and I go, they're so far away, I bet they can't even see me, which is great, you know. And then on the rare days when I go into the sauna and I come out and I go, but it's like, it's only there, it's a really small pool, he's just there. So there's almost, I think when you're swimming, there's this invisible barrier that's more than the fact that you're in the water and other people are dry. There's this invisible barrier that seems to it's almost like a tunnel vision effect that separates you from people. So when the call from his mother would come in, or the equivalent for any swimmer, like, that's an incredibly powerful link back to the rest of your life, to the people who are important. Your mother, you know. So it was great. You could see that. You could see the effect. It's like, okay, wow, he's picking up speed. How can he pick up speed? So there's you can't overestimate. I think we know that you can't overestimate. You know, I think all of us have probably said it at some stage. And look, when I say us, I'm not trying to put myself into the same shoes or the same category as Trent or you or anyone else. You know, it's just, I think we all know, as anybody who has done a channel swim or a big marathon swim or anything like that, you didn't get there by yourself. You know, you get there with, and you know, if you've had a coach, wow, your coach is hugely important. But your wife, who's going to make the dinner when you come home from the pool at night, you know, your husband who gets up in the morning if you're going out early, your kids who would like to see more, would like to see you more of it, you're tired, and all of that. There's no such thing as a solo. There's a team. So and for Trent, you know, he had Harley, he had Damien that he was good friends with. He had Damien's wife, who was friends with Trent as well, who was also being a pro. I remember, you know, I remember him being on the phone, and Damien, they were talking away, and then his mother comes on, you know. So there's that small team that not necessarily are all present, but they're all important. So his mother's all in.
I know you have a list of words that you use that actually that drive Trent. So you've seen Trent as a swimmer and as a human being. Like, I know he's a world champion, he's the holder of the English Channel record. Like, and you've seen several swimmers. Like, I mean, yeah. What are the few attributes or traits that you've seen that we can all pick up and work on from an individual like Trent?
Um, he's very modest.
Mm-hmm.
I've met channel swimmers who weren't anywhere near as capable as Trent. He was very modest. He's very respectful to all the people around him.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't any sense of I'm here. Let Dover bow before me. None of that. Um, and you know that wasn't for show. You know that was what I saw. So that there's that he's a nice guy.
There
he's
we
a
go. Yeah.
he's a good guy. You
Yeah.
know.
Good
So
man.
yeah.
Mhm. Awesome.
You almost feel like there should be something.
Mhm.
I should be able to put my finger on something, and there isn't that I'm aware of. Now, you know, recall that I didn't know Trent beforehand. It's been a while since the two of us have spoken, and that would have been by email. It would be a couple of years now at this stage, but you know, we did speak, you know, email over the years, and
Mhm.
that's who Trent is. He's not big headed that I saw at all. He's
Mhm.
nice to people. He doesn't see himself as being better, other people as being lesser or anything like that. So
Mhm. I never see him in the show light or in the media. Yeah.
no, no,
No.
yeah.
Yeah. I have his 6 hours and 55-minute T-shirt, 6:55. I gave it to my dad. And yeah, like, I mean, I actually watched that swim online.
Yeah.
We didn't have the digital capability that we had then, but it was just fantastic. It was exciting, yeah.
And
And
I didn't have a great camera. You know, the camera to some degree is important, particularly. But more importantly, I had much lesser kind of photography skills or anything at the time. So, you know, I made some mistakes that the later photographer in me would just kind of go, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. Um, just to be technical, with the photographs that I shot them all. Um, I shot them all compressed. You know, most of us were all familiar with JPEGs and stuff like that, but that's how I shot them. You know, a few more years more of photography. I wish I'd shot everything in what they call raw format, because I would have been able to make much better photographs of them. You know, I gave everything to Trent. I wish I had shot more video. Um,
Mhm.
but again, we were constrained by the Trent's camera and my camera. Between them weren't great.
Mhm.
None of us were having iPhones with long batteries and great video capabilities in our pockets at the
This
time.
wasn't there then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Storage was an issue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Things have changed a bit since then, you know. And again, you can't wind the time back. You also know that you're watching when you're watching the swim, and you're just there and you're a couple of meters away, and you've seen other swims before. You know, so many people will, outside of the sport, and even quite a few in the sport, will tell you like that there's nothing more boring than being crew at the swim. Um, I actually don't agree with that. I think not just Trent swim, any swim I've ever been on, I've never been bored, no matter
Mhm.
how long it was, because maybe, look, you know, we all bring different perspectives to it. But when you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh, I wish I could film for the 7 hours, you know, or you know, the hour and a half beforehand and the 2 hours afterwards, you know, wouldn't 10 hours of video been great? What else might I've been able to show people, or what else would a professional have had? You know,
Yeah.
I've I've seen. I think it was the year before Trent swam. I remember being in Dover, and a swimmer going out with a Red Bull filming crew,
Hmm.
and the contrast between them, again, you asked me what Trent was like. The contrast between them was marked. That person had come from an endurance background, but wasn't a distance swimmer, but had talked the English Channel swim. And Madhu, I'd be very surprised if you haven't come across someone like this, because I've come across quite a few of them who it's that extrinsic kind of thing. It's that we would think of it now as the social media bubble around it. What is that around the person? And that's more important than the actual swim. For most of us, it's just the swim. But that swimmer went out, lasted less than 2 hours out the channel. Was making fun of it, and I'd been in contact with the swimmer for like a year beforehand. They'd been asking me for advice, kind of along the lines of what you were saying, because specifically about the cold aspect that I'd been writing about. And I thought, it was never took external advice before the swim, versus Trent, who didn't know everything, but listened to the little bit of advice that he was getting. That maybe, okay, I don't know anything about that. What am I going to know more than the word number one, the word number two, and the word number one's coach, and probably one of the most experienced pilots in the world. What are Donal and Owen, these two Irish guys in the back of the boat? What are they going to know more? Hey, as it turns out, the one thing, and Trent had said to me, he knew I was going to wind him up on it at some stage, but the one thing that I knew a bit more about, and that you would know a bit more, was lubing for a long channel swim. Trent was so used to fresh water, he was used to long swims, but he the impact of, okay, you need to, let's get the channel grease.
Right.
So that was just that was just something that to me still is funny. It's like, for all, and but like, he wasn't, okay, yeah, don't say to do, let's do this.
Okay. Now, when you mentioned like people like Trent and people with Red Bull, and so I remember Anne Cleveland, one of the American swimmers from San Diego. So when I finished my channel, I was at White Horse, and she was having a Guinness, and we sat, and she mentioned something to me, and I still hold that very close. Some people get to the point, but they don't get the point. She was making a reference to Cape Grenee. So channel swimming, some people get to the point, but they don't get the point. So
I think it has happened. I can think of a few. I think in the majority of cases, the people who don't get the point don't get to the point either.
Yeah, you're right. Actually,
yeah. It's not 100%, but yeah. Great, yeah.
And one last question. I mean, we can talk forever.
I'm enjoying this, Madhu. Yeah. I don't get to talk about swimming. In my life, all my swim friends, I don't have any close by. I'm the only, I've got one friend who swims occasionally locally. That's it. I don't get to talk about swimming.
Okay. So here is what I know. Like, I mean, you have a busy life, work and everything.
Friday evening, so it's okay.
Yeah, but I think we should actually catch up on another chat, just talking about everything open water.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
But
let's continue with Trent.
Let's keep Trent. And one last question. Okay, from a cruise perspective, what does it require to beat Trent's record? I know you've mentioned, okay, Trent played a critical role there. Okay, so like, who is it that can break the record? What does it require? What kind of formula do we need to make it 6 hours and 54 minutes?
I know. I remember that I wrote something about it, but I can't remember exactly what I'd said. But I still remember that there were a couple of things that I thought. So do I think somebody can go faster? Absolutely. What's the limit? How fast can people go, or could somebody go? If everything was perfect, it's probably around, I think, 6.5 hours, 6 hours 35. something around there. And the only reason that I have for saying this, it's not because I've got any particular information about or understanding of how good swimmers can be and all the things, but the observations that I would have made from the day were, I think half an hour earlier start would have been better. That's just that's just something I think that and I'm sure that Mike Oram would disagree with me, and he's the pilot, so I would, if I was you, listen to him. Certainly something that could have been better, which is outside of control, but we've also all seen it in the channel, is perfect conditions, because Trent did not have perfect conditions. I can also recall that there were points at the swim. Certainly, I can't remember, was it, if you've read what I've written, I can't remember exactly, but it's certainly for the first few hours, Madhu, that Trent was 15 minutes ahead of Peter Stoja. So you could take that 15 minutes off and then go from there, and then add in what perfect conditions would take off that again. Those two, even if you utterly disregard that, maybe because half an hour is a very nebulous thing anyway, so that wouldn't have been a major impact. But the the conditions, the slightly improved line. Now that would make it sound like I know what I'm talking about piling across, right? But I'm not. But I'm only thinking about if I look at Trent's chart and I know where I think he kind of the technique went from being perfect to being almost perfect for half an hour, and I can see that mapped over a slight. It's not a deviation. It just looks as part of the overall curve. I think that curve would have been a little bit closer to straight, and that might have taken another 5 minutes, maybe, over the course of an hour and a half. So I think if you add all those things up, I think you get down to a theoretical 6 hours 30 to 6 hours 35, possibly. And would, as with all these kind of things, wouldn't it be great for somebody to come along and say, well, your man didn't know what he was talking about because I've just done 6 hours 20. Wouldn't that be great?
Yes. Donald, this is awesome. Actually, like as a crew, you also mentioned something, okay? Harley's role was just on Trent. At 4 hours and 5 hours, he noticed that, okay, his technique was falling apart because of his focus or whatever. He mentioned technique.
Yeah.
That shifted that whole, that changed the break. Yeah. So that's awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for this perspective. Yeah.
And I again, the other thing I would mention about Trent being almost like two people in the way that he could tell himself to be positive. I can't remember the point, but there was that point where at a feed he asked us to cheer him on. So we started cheering him on, and it had an impact. He just understood it. It wasn't a surprise to him, and he responded to it. That's how professional, how single-minded is that? Yes. Like that was incredibly impressive. And look, I don't want to be negative in any way, but I think for me, the most important thing that I would say about what I observed on swim wasn't during the swim. And I wouldn't like the discussion to go by without saying this. It was what happened, in the couple of hours before the swim. Without being disrespectful, or at least hoping I wouldn't be disrespectful, I thought the pre-swim briefing wasn't good. I've said it before, so it's not a secret that I'm saying. And I thought how Trent responded to some of the things that were put to him before the swim, I wouldn't have been. I think most of us wouldn't be able to. They were put negatively to him. The person, a person is saying to you before you go out and swim, you're not number one. You're not, or you were number one, but you didn't even get to go to the Olympics. Now, to me, whatever I might say or whatever I might think about someone being, involved in channel swimming, but to turn around and say that to somebody in a professional capacity before their swim, I think is deeply disrespectful. And, I think you probably understand what I'm talking about, but this is, some of the negative aspects that I see in channel swimming, and I think probably because I'm a bloody idealist, because this is like you, this is my hobby, so I think I can afford, most of us can afford to be 100% idealistic about this, and 100% expect people to act professionally and courteously and respectful and stuff like that. And Trent in his pre-swim briefing was essentially told he wouldn't do it by the most important person that could, and I'm not talking about his coach, that he couldn't do it. And I think that's an important thing. That's one of the things that I really came away with. I thought, doing that to somebody, what is the advantage? I'd come along later and then claim that it was, that was my way of motivating him.
No,
I was there, I saw it. That's not what it was. It was just mean-spirited, discourteous, and extremely disrespectful. And there's too much of that. We all have to deal with compromises. I don't think there was any call for it. It exists on video, so I've no doubt that I can ever stand over it. I know the response a couple of years later, when I was in the same position with a camera, I was told, you better not film any more of this. And it was like, I wasn't doing anything surreptitiously. It was Trent's swim. I was doing what he'd asked me to do, just record. I'm recording the briefing. I've been at briefings, pre-swim briefings before. And I was horrified is not too strong a term at what he did. So for me to take that happening a couple of hours before the swim and turn around and produce the world record swim is, to me, the truly magnificent part of that swim.
Way to go. Awesome. Yeah, I think we should stop this conversation at this
point.
I'm gonna stop recording, okay? And, way to go.
No problem.